Excited. So thank you for being here, everybody. My name is Carl Wolf. I'm a member of First Unitarian Church. This church has been around for 150 years here in Hobart as a Unitarian church that whole time. So we're very proud of our very simple and warm place. And over the last 3 months or so, we have been having a community-wide book group discussion around the book on Tyranny, which was written by, Timothy Snyder. Many of you are familiar with it. Have been coming to the discussion groups. It's a short book that has 20 different markers on how we should be looking out for and responding to tyranny. And Timothy Snyder wrote this book as he saw a increased proclivity and movement towards authoritarianism here in the United States. So some of the various chapters in the book are about defending institutions and believing in truth. And maybe some of you in the audience, what are some of the other chapters? Say that again?
Trust is the truth.
Trust is the truth? Yeah.
Beware of the paramilitary.
Beware the paramilitary. And so as this book discussion, which was meeting once every 2 weeks or so on Thursdays, was coming along, the group had this idea of inviting our U.S. Senators Todd Young and Jim Banks for a town hall. And welcome to Mr. Young, the Honorable, Mr. Young and Mr. Banks. Anybody? No. Yes. So I believe that Jim Banks's office responded with a stern no, we will not be there. Stern is the right way to do it. What's that?
I guess I can answer that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Senator Young's office just said that we could forward any questions we had through email to him. But we did forward questions to both of them. We had 2 pages of questions that we forwarded to both of them, and neither one of them responded. And then I did send Jim Banks' office the letter also, and they said, we already told you no, we're not going to do a town hall. And I said, okay, well, I'm not asking to do a town hall again, I'm just sending you the questions. So, but neither one of them responded to the questions, unfortunately.
I called yesterday.
Yes.
I was just curious, and I called Banks and Young's office to see if they were holding the numbers that I had for Banks was disconnected, things. So then when I got a hold of Young's office, I said, are you guys having any town halls? And he said, no, they're thinking about having some in the future because people are, wanting it.
Right.
And he said, are you requesting one? And I said, no, I just wanted to know if you were having any because I know they're on break. And I said, and I tried to call Banks' office and I said, the 2 numbers that I had must be incorrect. So they gave me a number, but I didn't call it.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. And then we did ask also if we could meet on Zoom, Todd Young's office, and they said no, that we could, if we went to Washington, D.C., we could meet with him, and we were like, well, that's kind of a lot. So, so we didn't do that either.
So we decided to go ahead with this forum anyway as an empty chair forum, and so we're going to have a little bit of a process here to try and facilitate in a way that would be like a town hall meeting if they were here. And people are invited to come up. We have 2 microphones set up here. You can come up and address the senators, as you would like, with your questions or comments. I will, have a loose timer of a couple of minutes for each speaker, so that no one person dominates the proceedings. If you have a question or a comment and you would like and you don't want to come up to the microphone, just let me know and I'll bring the microphone to you. And we want to have this event in a way that holds a certain covenant and a certain agreement with each other as to how we're going to be with one another. And so I believe maybe all of you all got the covenant for attendees, and at the Unitarian Church we're big on covenant because that's what holds us together in many ways. And so I'll just read it. In order to provide for a peaceful, rewarding, and safe proceeding, the host of this event asks that everyone in attendance agree to and abide by the following covenant: to allow everyone to participate equally and to not monopolize the conversation, to listen respectfully to everyone sharing regardless of whether their viewpoint is different from yours, to avoid side conversations and interruptions of the person who is speaking, to stay on topic while speaking and speak as briefly as possible to get your point across, to keep an open mind while sharing and learning from each other in this space, to be fully present for the meeting, which requires the silence or turning off of all devices, and to use no profane, vulgar, threatening, abusive, or disruptive language. So you guys are going to have to make sure that I maintain that last piece of the covenant. So I get a microphone, and you don't know what's going to happen. So that's how we're going to do it. So I think, people, I don't think we necessarily need to line up, but if people want to come and ask Mr. Banks or Mr. Young a question, they're welcome to.
Well, I think we're going to focus on the budget, so do you two want to talk about
Sure.
the effects of the budget?
Yeah, I can do that. So, and I guess my question to Mr. Young and Mr. Banks would be, I work at a nonprofit in the south suburbs of Chicago in Cook County, Chicago Heights, a nonprofit that provides health, hunger, and housing services, a food pantry, and rental assistance, and work with the homeless. And our organization, called Respond Now, is very concerned that the budget that's been proposed and in front of the Senate right now is going to cause a lot of harm to the communities in which we provide services. And so what would their solution be? What is their outlook in terms of people who are working, who are unable to work, who are doing the best that they can given their circumstances? What is the outlook going to be for people who suffer cuts in SNAP, food stamps, and suffer the loss of housing choice vouchers and programs that provide housing services? I'm standing here because I'm acting like I'm asking them this question. And it's a real concern for Respond Now and for all of our agencies. I know Becca will probably speak to it as well, but the food cuts are going to be extreme. Already there have been cuts in produce coming from local farmers to food pantries and to schools. Respond Now was receiving bi-weekly or twice a week food delivery from a farmer in Sauk Village with, fresh out of the ground, greens and green beans and so on and so forth. And it was just you know, when you go to a food pantry, it's a lot of canned and processed food. You know, we do the best that we can as a food pantry to provide fresh, healthy, you know, food, dairy, and so on. But for people to have the option to get vegetables that still have the roots on them, and you know, and have a little bit of dirt still on them from just being picked, was, you know, really important and really special. And we would see families, you know, like they were at the grocery store, like any of us do, right? We go to the grocery store and we pick up the apple and we smell it and we hold it. We pick up, you know, these beans, whether or not they look fresh, does the corn look good? Like, so to be able to give that to other people who at a food pantry is really, you know, it seems almost so simple, but it's empowering, right? It empowers you to be able to make those choices for yourself. And so that program was cut, just like gone. And, you know, and as a food pantry, we're also very concerned that not only, some of you may know what happens is that the USDA subsidizes farmers by buying their excess. And then they take that excess and then they deliver it to the food banks throughout the country, and the food banks send it to the food pantries. And that program is slated to be, you know, cut pretty drastically. And of course, the food stamp program is slated to be cut very drastically. And so we're just going to see this trickle-down effect of people losing SNAP benefits and then coming to the food pantry more often, and the food pantry not having as much food as they used to. And it's going to be devastating. And there's going to be increased hunger for children and for families, and there's just going to be increased, it's going to be bad. And then on the housing side, you know, people work, people don't work, whatever the case may be, people need housing, right? Health, hunger, and housing is, in my opinion, it's a non-negotiable. Regardless if you're a bad person or whatever, right? We often have these, oh, well, we can't give it, you know, they don't help themselves. Like, look, what? Housing and hunger and health, those are basic non-negotiables, and we go from there. And so within this spectrum of people who need help with their rent, you know, or with social services, mental health, to see that we're in a position where these housing choice vouchers are going to get cut, where supportive housing programs are going to get cut, people are going to end up on the streets. And there is not going to be shelter. There's not going to be anywhere for them to go. One of my colleagues, and I don't often say this because I think it's kind of it is alarming and we should be alarmed, but he says it a lot. People are going to die. People are going to die. And so I think that it's an extreme situation that, and this is the last thing I'll say, that is something that we as a community, we've gone through peaks and valleys throughout the history of the world, and we've persisted as a community. We've persisted, we've gotten better, we've improved. And, you know, for organizations like mine, like Respond Now, right now we're in a pretty scary valley. We don't know what's going to happen. But we are going to persist because the people in the community that support us, the businesses that support us, the clients, the participants that come to us because we're a place that treats people with dignity and respect, the caseworkers that are there, we are going to persist and we're going to get stronger because of it in the long run. And so, so that's what we're facing, is these budget cuts. So, yes, Wendy.
You mentioned the word a minute ago, and then you kind of backed off on the word die. I think that's one of the things that we can do is use the word.
Use the word.
Food insecurity. What was food insecurity?
That's correct. Right.
Hunger.
Hunger.
Starvation.
That.
Show some of those pictures of those children from the 30s standing there with starvation bellies and say, is this going to be your child?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we need to get down and ugly.
Yeah. No, that's true. I think, and why don't people come up to the mic? I think that would be better if you have, you know, or Wendy, I could have brought you the mic. I should have done that. But yes, I think the word food insecurity, which is something that's been used just in the last 10 or 15 years as the way to make it seem, to professionalize the word, right. It takes away from the dire, yes.
Do you know of any, like, local cities that have, or have a lot of reliance on food banks? Do you know if they are starting, like, community gardens or anything like that? Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, are food banks, do you want to do that?
I tried.
Yeah, food banks and hunger, prevent hunger agencies are doing community gardens and things like that.
Yeah, so I can kind of speak to that.
Introduce yourself.
I will.
Yeah.
My name is Becca Tucholsky. It's great to meet you all, senators. I am a first-time mother to a 2-year-old girl. I am a local farmer, and I'm also here to represent the NWI Food Council. And we work across all of Northwest Indiana to cultivate a just, thriving, and regenerative food system for all. So we operate a local food hub. We're working with local farmers across our region, and we're doing programming just like this. So helping schools get local food into their school cafeterias, helping them to start local gardens and community gardens. We're working in food access programming with farmers markets and helping them to become SNAP eligible farmers markets so folks can use their SNAP benefits at the markets. We also operate a double up program that allows folks utilizing those SNAP dollars to double their SNAP dollars up to $20 per day for fresh fruit and vegetables. So if they come to a farmer's market with $20 to spend in SNAP benefits, they now have $40 to spend on fresh fruit and vegetables.
I'm going to interrupt you, I'm sorry. My question is, though, now your SNAP benefits are gone, so now what do you do?
Right.
They have community gardens that, like in Gary, a lot of kids go to school, I know, that's their meal of the day. I'm not saying that I know that in Gary, but I'm just saying in general, I've heard that kids, that's their only meal, especially in the summer, they get meals during the summer, and now that's not going to be available. So now you're taking away the SNAP. Is this how you're helping?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the future with what those cuts are looking like. I think people are going to, organizations especially that are working in food access, are going to be a lot more reliant on local funding instead of federal funding. So I think our community foundations and other grant agencies are going to be overburdened with funding requests for programs like these. And I think that, senators, is why it's vital to not make these SNAP and Medicaid cuts and other cuts that are, being proposed to save on taxes. So to give you all a little bit of background, SNAP is widely recognized as being highly effective and efficient at not only addressing hunger, but also generating an economic activity. It started as the food stamp program way back in 1939, and currently we have 610,000 Hoosiers who are reliant on SNAP to feed themselves and their families.
Say that number again.
We have over 610,000 Hoosiers who rely on SNAP. That's roughly 264,000 children and 82,000 seniors. So how SNAP works, it's available to households who are low income. Those who qualify for SNAP receive benefits on an EBT card. Those benefits are timely, targeted, and temporary, and they receive about $1.40 per meal, or about $127 per person per month. Those benefits can only be used on food purchases, and every dollar in SNAP helps generate between $1.50 and $1.80 in economic activity. So it's great for our economy. It's great for giving people access to the foods that they need. But right now, the proposed One Big Beautiful Bill is bringing $300 billion in cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program over the next decade. And for that $300 billion cut, that would have rippling consequences on state economies and lead to a loss of about 143,000 jobs and $1.8 billion in lost state and government revenue across the country in just year one. On average, those program cuts would cause Hoosiers who are utilizing SNAP to lose between $110 and $120 monthly, which is about a week's worth of benefits. And so for folks who are relying on that completely for their food purchases, what does that look like? What does your trip to the grocery store look like? How much are you spending weekly on food? Do you think that you could get by if you had that much cut from your budget? And that's assuming that they aren't just kicked off the program altogether. These cuts would also impact all Hoosiers, right? Not just those who rely on SNAP. Because without that federal backing, the cost of SNAP benefits would be shifted to the states. And then Indiana would be on the hook to provide $356 million in benefits through state tax dollars. That would start in 2028. And then if the state can't step up for that amount, Hoosiers will lose access to 133 million meals. And Gleaner's Food Bank said that last year, Indiana's 11 food banks altogether provided 108 million meals. The food banks simply wouldn't be able to replace those 133 million meals, which gets back to your point. If we lose SNAP and people become reliant on the food banks, the food banks are already struggling with the loss in federal funding. So we're not going to be able to meet that deficit. And we are going to have people who are going hungry, people who are starving, people who are dying.
Hold on one second. Let me give you the. Hold on.
That's all I was going to say. It's not just trickling down as far as it's not just trickling down as far as, people dying, and the farmers they don't have any place to take their food to market.
Right.
So it affects them as well.
And as a local farmer myself, I can definitely attest to that.
What can we do to?
Great question. This isn't looking good. And it's hard to see when our representatives speak out about our local farms and say, we support our local farmers, but do you? Do you, really? Because we're not feeling it. Especially with these federal cuts, the recent federal cuts to the local Food for Schools program. In our area, the NWI Food Council and our Food Hub Region Roots was the grant recipient to be able to bring those funds to our farmers to get food purchases to the schools. So schools were able to order the fresh foods that they needed to be able to serve in their cafeterias. And in like a year and a half-ish that we operated the program, we brought over $1 million in purchases to our region's farmers.
And this was supported through the USDA.
This was through the USDA Local Food for Schools program. And all of that funding for the coming year was cut.
About 2 months ago.
Yeah. And so, that generated over $1 million in local revenue. That's huge. And it was feeding our kids, many of whom rely on that school lunch as their only meal of the day. And this was directly serving schools who were eligible, which meant it was schools who were 50% or more of their student population had free or reduced lunch. So these were kids who need that food.
And so what was the impact of local farms with that program being cut?
So a lot of our local farms, we were already anticipating getting that grant funding from the state again. The contract hadn't been signed, but we were just, waiting for things to move forward. And many of our local farms had already, with the success that they have seen in the past year and a half, have already started to expand their farms. They've already purchased seeds. They've already purchased new equipment. They bought new land because this was a growing program and we were seeing such success with it. And so now, those farmers are just out. So now where are they selling their food to? this incredible outlet that we had with our schools no longer exists.
And those are farms here in Northwest Indiana,
Yeah.
like Porter County and
Yeah.
so on and so forth?
I don't know. So like one of the bigger ones out in this area, I don't know if anybody knows Perkins Good Earth Farm. They're out of DeMont. But they were one of our largest sellers into the program. They were doing a lot of great things, and we're expanding, and now it's just cut. I will say too, I mentioned the farmers markets earlier. Farmers markets in Indiana see around $110,000 spent on SNAP benefits annually. That's just at farmers markets. And so those are folks coming to the market utilizing those SNAP benefits for any SNAP eligible purchases, fresh fruits and vegetables, dairies, grains. And then in addition to that, we have the Double Up programming too, that was matching those SNAP dollars up to $20. And so not only is that improving access to those fresh foods, but that was an additional benefit for our farmers and producers. That was increasing their revenue as well.
Yeah, hold on.
I'm kind of sensing there's like a conflict of what they're saying. I mean, because we're keeping America healthy, which is what the farmer is doing.
Maha, right?
Right? But then you're taking it away so that they can't even get healthy food, and you're killing the farmer, his livelihood too. So
Yeah.
who wins here? Who's winning?
And it's frustrating to see too. I know the USDA just recently put out an announcement that they spent $67 million, or they're devoting $67 million to fresh seafood and produce purchases from our local farmers. And that all sounds good and well, but then when you look at it, it's for things like dried cherries and canned peaches. It's like, well, these aren't things that are supporting our small farmers, right? These aren't the fresh fruits and vegetables that were available through the local Food for Schools program. And so when you do some digging into that, yeah, it seems just kind of counterintuitive.
Anything more on SNAP food access in particular? Yes.
They already cut the funding for free lunches for kids?
So no, not yet, but there was a program called the Local Food for Schools program that allowed schools to purchase from local farmers. So all of that funding has been cut.
Is it anticipated though that free and reduced lunches for kids are going to be?
I think that, it's definitely like on the line right now. I think there's some uncertainty around that of what it's going to look like for each state.
Thank you for being here. Could you elaborate a little bit more? Because you said you're a farmer yourself here.
I am.
Would you feel comfortable, because I feel like you put a real face, right, to
Yeah.
a farmer in the area. So would you tell us a little bit more about you and your farm and what you do and how this has all personally affected you? Because
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here as a real face and a real person that's affected.
Totally. So I wear a lot of hats. I have a full-time job with the NWI Food Council. My husband is a teacher, and then we both actually started out as teachers in LaPorte, which worked out really well with the farming side of things because we both had summers off, so we were able to devote our summers to farming. We're farming on a little less than an acre right now. We just have a homestead farm in LaPorte County. It's called Tuhalski Produce, and we're growing a variety of fruits and vegetables. Last year, we managed to get, it's called an EQIP grant through the USDA, and it allowed us to put up a high tunnel so that we can be growing tomatoes in the summer and cucumbers, and then also extend our growing season into the winter so that we can do greens and things throughout the winter. So we can be growing year round, which is really, really cool. You wouldn't think that that's possible in Indiana, but it is. With those USDA grants, thankfully, we got it in time and got our funding in time because a lot of folks have seen cuts with their funding, and they applied for the program and then funding was frozen, so there's a lot of uncertainties around that. But as a farmer, I have been able to sell into the local Food for Schools program when we had that funding. It's really just, it's part-time for us, so we're not full-time farmers, just simply because we don't have time to be. But it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's not really something that I'm making a lot of money on, but I want to be able to feed my community. And so I love the opportunity to be able to sell into our local schools across the region. I think that's so cool. We have another program called Farm Her to Mama, and it's Farm Her working with female farmers across our region. And we're putting together food totes for these first-time new moms who are in need of food access. So they're WIC eligible moms living at or below 250% of the federal poverty level. They're moms who are enrolled in an organization called Nurse Family Partnership, who has home visiting nurses who visit moms in home weekly from early in pregnancy up through 2 years postpartum. And they provide care and services and support and just empowerment for the moms. And so when we received funding from the state to be able to start this program, the Farmer to Mama program, we reached out to Nurse Family Partnership because they had told us their moms have a need for food access. Their moms are hungry. And we thought that this would be a great opportunity to build that really supportive environment with our female farmers, bring together these fresh food items, and get them to the moms. So it's been a really incredible program. I lead that program with the Food Council, but then I also get to grow for that program as a farmer. And I'm a new mom too. So it's like all kind of tied together and really, really beautiful and special. Yeah, that is, real quick, that's another program. Nurse Family Partnership is largely funded through Medicaid, which is additionally seeing cuts through this proposed bill.
And you mentioned WIC. WIC is also on the...
So WIC is okay for now. I don't believe it's in this bill specifically, but a lot of families who rely on WIC are also receiving Medicaid benefits. And so it's kind of like hand in hand how those things are tied together.
Hi, I'm Paige.
Hi.
A couple people were asking about school benefits and school lunches and things. I'm a mom to an elementary school kid, and we did get newsletters saying, hey, the summer EBT program is not a thing, so here's a website where you can find alternatives.
Yeah.
That is happening now.
Yeah. So there's a program Indiana called it Sunbucks, and it's a summer meal program. It's a summer SNAP program, actually, for kiddos who are eligible. And it basically sent home, I have specific stats on that too. It sent home $120 in SNAP benefits per eligible child. And the Sunbucks program served nearly 700,000 kids in Indiana in 2024. We received that funding. That was federal funding. The states just had to opt into it. So Indiana received that funding to be able to provide that to the schools who are participating either as it's called a CEP school, so a community eligibility provision school. So if like enough students are free and reduced lunch eligible, the school can apply for this provision. So all students might receive that through those schools, or if the students themselves are SNAP eligible, they would receive this SNAP funding. But those SNAP cards, each card per child in the family, those could be used on any SNAP eligible purchases. And those could also be used at farmers markets as well on those fresh fruit and vegetable purchases. And so this year, federal funding comes along and the state declined it, even though we participated last year. And the statement that they put out was that when this administration took office, we discovered that the necessary groundwork had not been completed to launch the program in time for this summer. That was the statement that was given. When this administration took office, we discovered that the necessary groundwork had not been completed to launch the program in time for this summer.
And that's the state administration.
That's the state administration saying this regarding this Sunbucks program. So now We have 700,000 kids across Indiana who could have received these benefits, $120 in SNAP benefits per eligible child, who are no longer eligible because the state didn't accept the federal funding.
Yeah. Wait.
I forget it by the time you get here, Rob. No, okay, we've talked about SNAP, but what about like Meals on Wheels? Does your program help Meals on Wheels at all? Because I think that the elderly are going to be affected.
They will be, yeah. So Meals on Wheels, we work with their senior programming, some of their food boxes that they distribute in partnership with the Food Bank of Northwest Indiana. And there's like medically tailored meals that they distribute. And NWI Food Council, we work with our Food Hub, Region Roots, and our local farmers to be able to provide produce that the food bank can purchase to then put in those food boxes. But Meals on Wheels is another organization like Nurse Family Partnership that is also at least partly funded by Medicaid. And so Medicaid provides health coverage for low-income individuals and families. It ensures access to that necessary medical care, improves health outcomes, allows people to go get the prescriptions that they need, allows people to go to the doctors when they need to see their doctors. And it's a major source of funding for healthcare providers and agencies like Nurse Family Partnership, agencies like Meals on Wheels. Without that Medicaid funding available, those providers, those organizations may struggle to operate in the way that they do. And it may lead to a shortage of those services in underserved areas. Research has shown that Medicaid is literally a life-saving program. So the $800 billion in reduced Medicaid spending is pretty impactful and pretty atrocious. One of the big things right now that they're looking at through this bill is having new work reporting requirements. Data already shows that most of the individuals on Medicaid are already working. This would be reporting requirements for individuals who became eligible for Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which is generally adults without children who are living in or near poverty. So most of those folks who became eligible for Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act are already working. This is just an additional reporting requirement that would make them show that they are working, basically. But the Medicaid population can at times be difficult to reach. People with lower incomes are more likely to change addresses. They're more likely to have irregular work schedules. They're less likely to have regular internet access. And because of all those things, folks who are on Medicaid can struggle to send that paperwork by mail or complete an online form. And if they fail to do that, when a Medicaid work requirement is in effect, they will lose their health coverage.
Not only are they working one job, but they're working 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah.
And so there's no, there really
to
literally
try
is
to
no
make
time.
ends meet. Yeah, there's such limited time, for sure. There was a question. far
Okay, we're
back,
going to take
too.
one or two more questions, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you. Sorry, not a question. I just wanted to affirm what you were saying about these requirements. You know, maybe they sound great in theory, but it really is so difficult on people who are receiving those benefits. If you have a full-time job, in my experience, drive all the way across town, sit hours in a waiting room for a meeting to prove that I was at the job that I just had to leave to prove that I'm working, right?
Thank you for that.
For failure is basically what it is.
It
They're
is.
hoping to set people up for failure, which is crazy.
It is.
Oh. Okay.
I
Yeah,
do
go ahead.
one kind of last final point I want to say about Medicaid funding. A lot of these programs and organizations that are funded by Medicaid are often dismissed as just like nice to have, but we need to see them as more than just nice, right? They're essential. They're needed. We need those for healthier futures, for healthier generations. So protecting Medicaid funding is not just about preserving a safety net. It's about supporting the systems that help children, that help families, that help communities to grow stronger, healthier, and more resilient. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, and just,
We collected for the farm herd of mama.
yeah, just kudos to First Unitarian Church in Northwest Indiana. We collected for Farm Herd of Mama last month. So.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. We appreciate that.
Okay, hi. Sorry, my name's Carrie, and I'm on Social Security Disability. I'm 64. I'm on Medicare, and I'm on Medicaid, and I am just making it because they pay my premium, which I don't know if you know that, but Medicaid, if you have both Medicare and Medicaid, it pays the premium for Medicare. So that's $185 now for the premium. So if I would lose Medicaid, then I would have to come up with $185, which right now, after I pay my bills, if it hasn't been really cold or really hot, I have $100 to live on a month. Where am I going to get that $185? And when I go to the doctor, I have to go monthly because I have a lot of maintenance medication, and I have to pay copays. Medicaid picks that up too. And when I'm in the hospital, I don't have bills when I come out because I've had surgeries and I didn't know anything. So if I lost Medicaid, I would also lose United Healthcare, which gives you some kind of dual plan. So I would be left with Medicare and my income. So my income would be cut drastically and I'd lose my house. I would have to sell it and take any, I don't know how much equity's in there, but take any equity and find somewhere else to live. So it does a lot more, as you've explained, than mine. So let me ask, why? Why are you being so cruel? I don't get it. There's a lot of other things you can cut, but you won't. Suck-ups.
Thank you, Carrie. Anybody else would like to come up, change the topic? Come on up, unless you want me to bring you the microphone. Do you have a question for Senator Young or Senator Banks?
You said
Yes.
about then you might have to sell your home.
Yes.
Then you would become homeless.
Yes.
And what I don't understand, now this doesn't have anything to do with the senators, but it has to do with the state. And I
Right.
noticed that this year, they passed some laws, which I don't know specifically what they were and what they entailed, but it had to do something with homelessness and that you would be put in jail. And I thought, what is the point of that? It kind of doesn't make sense. So, but that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're putting people out on the street. If we take these benefits away, we don't want to feed them and we don't want to house people when people want to just live in their homes, basically. So it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, for context, and I'm going to just kind of try and pull this out. Last year, the Supreme Court, there was a case in front of the Supreme Court called Grants Pass, where it allowed municipalities and states to essentially make homelessness illegal. And there are some states, for example, I know in Illinois right now, the state of Illinois is working towards legislation that would, it allows municipalities and states, Grants Pass, to make that determination, right, whether or not. And so it gives the states the right to make a determination. So right now in Illinois, for example, they're trying to pass legislation where homelessness would not be considered illegal. But in places like places in Indiana, assuredly, people who are homeless will end up getting shelter in jail. So yeah, did you want to speak to that?
The state passed a law, and starting July 1st, I Joe, I was just reading that they're breaking up all the Medicaid that they pay. They're breaking it up and putting it in different departments for different responsibility. So I could lose it through the state July 1st, and then whatever happens federally. So all these people are waiting to see what happens in Indiana and federal.
Come on up. You have a question for the senator? Ers?
Oh, boy.
I do. I have a question for the senator. I don't see anything on these fact sheets addressing prisons, but if any of you have ever known anybody in prison, you know a little bit about how this system works. And apparently we're going to fill up those prisons even more. We have the highest prison population, I think, of any country in the world, full of homeless people, full of people who need mental health care. I have a friend whose son has been in prison for 10 years because he was a drug addict and had mental health issues. He's still there. He gets nickel and dimed for anything he tries to do, extra food because he's a young man and he's hungry, for starters, for every text message he sends, for every email message he sends, for every phone call he makes, overcharged for all of these services. I'd like to know what you're going to do about that, senators. Do you have any idea? Oh, and there's no opportunity except if he gets somebody on the outside to mail him a book, and it has to come from Amazon, and it better be a soft cover book, to get any sort of support for making his life better. Are you hearing this? I don't know if anybody knows anything else about rehabilitation, true rehabilitation for prisoners, for people who are taken prisoners, so many wrongfully, but even people who are prisoners because they've committed a crime. Like, what are you doing to help them make their lives better, to bring them back into society, to help them to be contributing again and not be a financial drain and a horrible affront to humanity? Thank you.
My name is Miles. I'm here because I know Sandy, and I want to address our two senators. First, let me say positively, Senator Todd is accessible. You can talk to him, he'll talk back to you, and I want to compliment Senator Todd on the idea of upgrading the United States Navy. Now, let me remind him that the naval ships today are not made of wood. They're made of steel. And he needs to check, not only are we going to build more ships, but we're going to build them with steel made right here in Northwest Indiana. So he needs to check on that. He's got a good idea, but he needs to follow up on that. And I have confidence that he will follow up on that. So let me say that you can access Todd. He's good. He deserves the name senator because of the problem. The other guy, though, I am not so sure he deserves that name senator. Maybe not even Mr. Because let me give you an example. He is fully in track with this big, beautiful bill that came out of the House. And one provision in that is that it will allow the federal government to take away your virtual personal network. Now that is a protection thing that all your internet traffic from your house to everywhere is encrypted. So bad guys on the dark web can't steal your money. And that does happen. That does happen. They're very clever at that. So we need that protection. But in the bill that banks is going to support says that the federal government can get into your encrypted internet stuff. They already have your Social Security numbers, your income tax numbers with the IRS. So I think that that provision is bad. As I said, Todd is accessible, Banks is not. A person approached Banks and said, why did I get laid off? I'm a federal employee. Why did I get laid off? And Bank said, with no compassion, oh, you probably deserved it. So he doesn't look at the situation of due process at all. So let me say, good guy, not so good.
I have a question. I guess I invite people to come up and give their opinion on this. Mr. Banks is going to support the budget bill. Is Senator Young going to support it? Is he going to vote for it? Is there any indication? What do people, it's just a question to think about, but perhaps he will ultimately, but maybe not. If he is,
I have gone to some other meetings and they have said, I didn't feel like calling my senators because I didn't feel like they would listen, you know? But what I was told was call them anyway because there is a record kept of how many calls they get. So don't think that, oh, I'm not going to call because they're not going to listen to me. They're going to do what they want anyway. But if they have more, a tally of how many phone calls they've had, then they still have to recognize that. They can't say nobody called.
okay. Invite somebody else up. Oh, yes. Paige, you're going to come up. That's it? And she retreats. Thanks for making the long walk up.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I am originally from Las Vegas. They have no programs there at all. Do you know that they actually count how many homeless people live there? 8,000 and growing. I love Hobart and the community here. I don't want it to change. It is a privilege to be able to go fill up your gas tank without having a homeless. Hey, you got 50 cents? Hey, you got $1? Hey, because there's no programs there for them. There's no programs there for them. Yeah, they're on every corner. Do you want to see homeless in our streets here? Do you want to see them in front of the schools? I don't. That's why I moved here. For the beauty, your green, your friendliness, the community that's strong. And I want to see it continue.
I'm going to disagree a bit with Lisa. We need to see the homeless. The point is, we don't see them. Where we live, we don't see them. We don't know that they're, we may know that they're there, but we don't see them. And when you don't see a problem, when you don't see someone in need, you're not going to reach out to help them. So we need to see them. I want to see them, and I think we all need to see them more. Otherwise, we won't do what we need to do.
Speaking from experience in the south suburbs, but also my wife works for the VA as a homeless outreach person, homeless outreach caseworker here in Northwest Indiana. So she travels all throughout Northwest Indiana and engaging with the homeless veterans, which very busy, very, very busy woman. There is an extreme lack of housing programs here in Northwest Indiana. Just very difficult to find shelter. There's a couple of shelters in Gary, but it's very difficult. And yeah, the homeless are among us, and some of us are not too far away from homelessness when we think about it. So, yes.
In Porter County, and I know it may be in Lake County, because it's across Northwest Indiana as far as South Bend, there is a group, I think it's called Making a Better Indiana. I'm not sure, but each area that belongs to this group targets what they want for their community. And in Valparaiso, this particular group has targeted homing. Not only necessarily for the homeless, but making affordable homes available. You say Valparaiso and affordable in the same sentence, and they don't fit. So anyway, that's kind of that. There is an organization, and as I say, I'm sure some of you are already aware of that organization and what they're doing, but it's a thought. The thought that I keep coming back to with food is the amount of food that we waste because we don't know how to use food. If someone brought us in a bushel of tomatoes right now and said, I know your family loves tomato juice, here's a bushel of tomatoes. Not us. We know how to can tomato juice. But our daughters and granddaughters, nieces and nephews, don't. And when we talk about these food programs, somewhere, and maybe I just read about it, but some organizations like some churches, some schools, some other organizations, senior centers, are starting basic cooking classes, teaching how to cook. Find out you can bake a loaf of bread and watch TV at the same time. We need action. Maybe these are the kind of actions we need to go back to basics. Clothing. Resale shops are having a great time, but I'll bet there's hardly a person, not in this room, of course, that could sew a seam in a pair of pants by hand. Or a button on. Or have arthritis and couldn't, and that's why I don't wear buttons.
I think you think too highly of us, Wendy. Okay. I don't think.
But, we need action. We can sit here and talk about it till we're blue in the face, and we're all good at that. But action is where it is. And going back to the very basics is something that I think we need to consider, and consider how we can go back and be useful in the community teaching basics. The schools gave it up because, we can't have teaching home ec in school anymore. It's out of date. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's back.
Thank you. Got it.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, I'm Molly Dunscombe. I'm married to Miles. He's a better speaker than I am, so I'm going to use notes. I wanted to talk about due process, senators, and I think there's a slightly difference in what the two senators think. On April 21st, Senator Banks, you said that foreign terrorists aren't entitled to the same due process or constitutional rights as Americans. And yet, the 5th and 14th Amendment offer protections for all individuals from being deported or disposed of life, liberty, and the pursuit, or property, excuse me, without due process or of law. I ask you, Senator Banks, how was the innocence or guilt determined to those individuals that were deported to El Salvador, including Mr. Garcia? Now, Senator Young has a slightly different, Senator Young, view, but yet I'm not secure on what you think. On April 15th, at a town hall in Bloomington, you discussed the question of due process with a member of the audience. You said, "I feel like deporting criminals should not be controversial." The woman then asked, "How do you determine if they are criminal?" Later, you said, "I didn't want to accept the premise without being proven in a court of law." There was a deportation of those that aren't illegal, those who aren't here illegally. Your second response seems to indicate that you do support due process for all people. Please clarify for us today that you do support the constitutional value of due process for everyone, including people like Kelmar Abrigo Garcia, who was deported without due process.
Would anybody like to fashion a response? Anybody like to answer for Mr. No. That's a hard one. Any other thoughts about due process or other things? Yes. You want to come up? Yeah.
Senators, good afternoon. I'm Doug Taylor. I'm a teacher in Gary, and I also am concerned about due process because I think that's a really essential piece of how business operates, because we all like stability, and as business operates, they want to know how, if you have contracts, you have to have confidence that those are going to be enforced, right? Otherwise, you don't know what to do with that, how things will proceed. I'd like to switch gears, though, and ask you if you're willing to do your job as a co-equal branch of government and hold a lawless administration accountable. We have so many examples of this administration just running roughshod. You can start with DOGE and go all the way down with USAID and all the other closures and the Impoundment Act's violations. All those things are happening. And I hear crickets from both of you about your response to that. So I would ask if, again, if you're willing to do your job as a co-equal branch of government and hold an administration accountable. Thank you.
So I read a lot of news and editorials, and I listen to radio programs and so on. I don't watch TV except occasionally 60 Minutes. And from time to time, there's a column or an opinion piece, and the question comes up, gosh, is this going to be a constitutional crisis if this happens or the other thing happens, if a court does this or a government does this? And I'm here to tell you we're way past constitutional crisis. We are in a dictatorship. Our president, with the assent of Congress, is
acting as a dictator. He's writing his own laws. They've already arrested one congressman. There'll be more to follow. One judge has been arrested so far. It's clearly meant to intimidate our other judges. Judges are being called out by members of the administration by name for the purpose of intimidating them, of encouraging the MAGA thugs to come and swat those people. We've had multiple instances of that. There are quiet reports that Republicans have been intimidated and scared in Congress, scared to vote against the majority Republican bills because they are physically afraid for themselves and, more importantly, their families. So we have due process has been essentially discarded, as it's been mentioned. Somebody mentioned contracts. There's a clause in the Constitution about contracts. The Doge has just gone through canceling contracts right and left without due process. People are losing their jobs for disagreeing with the president, for expressing another opinion. They're attacking our educational institutions. Harvard, Columbia, IU, Purdue yesterday eliminated their DEI programs. I generally make some small contributions to Purdue annually. This year my contribution will be limited to the express purpose of supporting DEI initiatives. It'll be encumbered. We'll see what they do with that. We really need to see this dictatorship for what it is. And just because the thugs haven't broken into my house or your house doesn't mean that the country as a whole isn't living under a dictatorship. If you think of even, not just Russia, but think of North Korea, China, they're clearly dictatorships. Most of their people aren't in prison. They live in daily fear of it, but they haven't been sent to prison, but they're under a dictatorship, and so are we. And we need to beat that back. And the way it's going to get beat back is by mass action in the streets, general strikes, physical resistance to illegal arrests, calls for impeachment of not just the president, but of his main officers who have committed impeachable offenses, like Kristi Noem and the head of Homeland Security, the head of Immigration. Others have committed, way back when they impeached President Jackson, it was determined that although the Constitution says high crimes and misdemeanors, that the real reason to impeach is whatever the Congress decides it is. It's good behavior, okay? In fact, for judges, the Constitution specifically says they hold their offices on good behavior. So there are at least 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices that ought to be impeached for failure to have good behavior, corruption. You can't even list all of the reasons that Donald Trump ought to be indicted. Multiple instances of gross corruption, of theft, of writing laws. He's been indicted in 2 states for election attempts to steal the elections. He's a felon in New York State. He was banned and should have been in prison from stealing from a charity that he put in. There's no end of things. Nobody can remember all of them because they throw more stuff out practically on a daily basis, which is intentional. So our ways to oppose this is literally to physically oppose this. We've got to be out in the streets, not once a month or 2 months for the women's report, but weekly or more often. We need to take to the streets. We need to, for those that can, it's a hard ask, general strikes, physically disobedience by standing in front of the thugs from Homeland Security and others. the FBI has been corrupted. The other government agencies have been corrupted. The military remains to be seen. Top officials have been dismissed. Why? Well, because maybe they're loyal to the Constitution instead of the president, or maybe they're just the wrong color or the wrong sex. So we're in a serious situation here. Maybe we're not quite as bad as the Civil War, but we're getting there. We're well on our way. So that's what I have to say.
It's going to fall. Second here, let me get this so that this short person can be heard. Okay. Okay. Why aren't you guys paying any attention to the Constitution? Where have you been? I've got one right here. I'll be very happy to mail you copies so that you can read them, so that you can understand how this administration is undermining the Constitution in every single way, every day, every hour. You belong to the section of the government which is in Article 1 of the Constitution. The founders thought it was the most important part of the government, which is why they made it Article 1. You're not doing your job. None of you are doing your job. Let me explain things to you. Due process is required by Article 4, which says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be a citizen of this country. They just have to exist within the confines, within the boundaries of this country. No warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, suspected by oath or affirmation, and supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And I'm guessing you that the masked brown shirts that have been arresting, handcuffing, and taking people away from their families didn't do any of this. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia. A little bit longer, but that part isn't important. Article 14. This part is important. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So let me ask again, where have you been? Where have you been when DOGE, which is an illegal organization, which came in and essentially raided our country's federal government, essentially raided things that were helping people? Where were you then? What did you do? Did you come up anywhere and say, this has to stop because it's totally unconstitutional and illegal and immoral and cruel? Where were you? Did you say anything about that? I sincerely doubt it. And now that DOGE has left this country in shambles, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to see that comes before you and testifies and is punished for their crime? Are you going to do anything? Or are you just going to sit there and not do anything? And somebody mentioned something about fear of retribution. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, this is one of the questions that you were asked that was mailed to you, sent to you. And we would like to know, do you think that retaliation should be addressed by members of Congress? Are you going to do anything about the many, many, many ways that this administration has retaliated against people? Lisa Murkowski said, specifically said, we are all afraid, and noted that she has felt very anxious herself because this retaliation is real and it's everywhere. So you are responsible. You need to be held responsible for not what you've done, for what you haven't done, for what you haven't said, for the people that you haven't spoken up to defend, for all the many, many ways that you have allowed this country in just 5 short months to descend into what can only be called a dictatorship, what can only be called an authoritarian nightmare, that we can only pray that we will ever, ever survive.
I have a question for Senator Banks. Last year, you introduced a bill with Elise Stefanik from New York in response to what you call anti-Semitic universities, the encampments that popped up on universities, including Indiana University. Students who were protesting the war and harm being done to Palestinians. And I just want to ask, why is it that this bill conflates the notion that support for this, or a lack of support for the state of Israel, to disagree and to disagree with the notion of Zionism is in itself anti-Semitic. As the grandson of a woman who fled the pogroms of the Ukraine back in the 1900s, early 1900s, as the son of parents who were out there on the front lines fighting Nazis and the Klan, as the grandson of somebody who celebrates the Passover holiday every year by singing the Zognik song that was sung by those in the Warsaw ghettos who were fighting the Nazis, as a father of children who were at the encampment at IU, it is beyond the pale that you would equate my criticism of Israel and for the genocide that they are committing with anti-Semitism, when I personally and Jews throughout the world Israel to be held accountable for this genocide that they are committing against our Semitic brothers and sisters in Gaza and in the West Bank. And so it is offensive to me. It is offensive to many Jews throughout the world. And I ask of you to stop funding the state of Israel with arms, and to hold Benjamin Netanyahu and the state of Israel accountable for this genocide that they are committing. Thank you. address the empty chairs?
So first of all, I think all of you here have been amazing, every little point that you brought up. I'm just grateful to be here. And senators, I think every argument you heard here, every little topic is all essential. These are major issues that you need to be addressing. And the interesting part is this all goes under Make America Great Again. Oh my gosh. What an oxymoron we are living under as Americans. How is anything that's going on that's harming human lives, starving people, not giving Medicaid, dealing with the people in Gaza, looking at cuts all across from education to all the programs that are needed, how is this making America great again? And I'm asking you, who is it making America great again for? Because I think that's where your focus is on. Who do you want to make America great again for? Who are we fighting for? We're not fighting for the common people anymore. And I'm grateful to this country because years ago I used to be a 5th grade teacher. And I was given curriculum that the US government put together called We the People. I taught the Constitution to the 5th graders. My 5th graders would be completely upset living in what we just heard, the changes that are being made, the lack of following our Constitution. They understood that. How are you not smarter than 5th graders? I also want to address, I don't know how many of you know Jane Elliott, but I love Jane Elliott. In 1968, she was one of the most courageous teachers I know, who stood up and did an experiment with brown eyes and blue eyes in her classroom to teach about what it feels like to be treated less than because of your color of your skin or your race. I was in a school system that allowed me to actually do that very experiment. And I taught in Hammond schools. Whites are a minority in Hammond schools. I taught that. Within 2 hours, those kids that we called it pink and yellows, within 2 hours of those kids that had not the best books, didn't have me giving them respect, didn't have the same water fountains, those kids figured out very quickly what was happening to them, and they changed their whole demeanor. In the afternoon, we'd switch, and I'd watch what happens when they got the power. Racism is behind so much of what is going on in this country. The way we look at who we take care of, who we are deporting, is not what this country should be about. Diversity is what makes a difference here. We have people working here, and the Supreme Court just decided that they're here legally, and guess what? We can get rid of them. What the heck? Where are we going? We are the people of America, and you are representing us. And guess what? If you were on Trump's show, he'd probably say you're fired.
I just wanted to ask this bill, this budget bill cuts the defunds Planned Parenthood essentially, and the Congressional Budget Office had said that would lead to $300 million more costs for the government, essentially from less access to contraception and more children being enrolled in Medicaid due to that. So why, if it's going to cost more money and cause loss of access to contraception, STD testing, basic health care for a lot of people, especially at Medicaid, where the Planned Parenthood office is the best, easiest place for them to get health care. Why are we defunding that when the federal government already does not pay for abortions due to the Hyde Amendment? It's not limiting access to abortions. It's cutting basic essential health care for especially low-income individuals. Also, I saw an article about Casey Carpenter, a state legislator from Georgia who is pushing Republicans in his state to work for common sense immigration reform because he feels that immigrants are very important to his area's economic health as they are everywhere. And he's encouraging legislators to try to see the real human cost of the immigration policies of this administration and how they're affecting all of our communities. So we hope that more Republicans take the lead, and I encourage the senators to take Casey Carpenter's lead and try to encourage Republicans to work towards common sense immigration reform instead of the ways that this administration is going about it.
We have time for one more question. Otherwise, thank you for being here, everyone. I'd like to thank Senator Banks and Senator Young for not being here. Yes, so maybe they'll watch it. Thank you very much. Please come join us on any particular Sunday, 11 o'clock. We have service here. And what's that? There's a vigil. June 14th. At what time?
The doors open at 6:30 to do some snacks and posters.
6:30. Interfaith vigil for immigration justice. I got to get with the program. Thank you very much. There's snacks in the parish hall, and have a good rest of your day. Good job, Carl. Thank you.